All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MCJ Report number 161. Please go ahead and share the broadcast. Let's get the word out there. And if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome on board. I'm your host, Morgan C. Jonas. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on the agenda for tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be talking about, first of all, one of our so-called conspiracy theories that came true. That's right. And of course, I'm using this term conspiracy theory in tongue-in-cheek. We're also going to be talking about the digital identity and why it's a problem. Also, Shanghai residents have stood up for their rights. That's right. The city of Shanghai has been subjected to a brutal lockdown, all 26 million residents. So we're going to have a good chat about that. Also, making political history. That's right, the Great Education Program. The Facebook group has suddenly been removed from Facebook. We're going to have a bit of a talk about that, and we've been given no reasoning for why this is, so all we can really do is speculate. Also, ATAGI has given advice on sedated vaccination. That's right. When is it okay and when is it not okay? So we're going to have a bit of a look at the wording that ATAGI has used, and I'll once again, just like what we always do on MCJ Report, I'll leave it up to you at home to make your own determination about it. So, all right, let's get stuck into things, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Again, thank you for being here. It's great to have you on board. Share the broadcast. Let's get the word out there. We are independent media, and we like to tell the other side of the story that is often conveniently left out by the mainstream media, and I wonder why that is. Anyway, alrighty. So, first of all, now, as a lot of you know, I am running as an independent for the Senate in this year's upcoming election. So just like MCJ Report being independent, our campaign is independent. There's no big manager or anyone like that tapping me on the shoulder telling me what to do and what to say. I am answerable only to the people I intend on representing. If you'd like to know more about my campaign, visit morgancjonas.com and make sure that you enter your email address on the sign-up form so you can take part in our campaign. And we're heading all over Victoria, and I can tell you this is a campaign unlike what you've ever seen before. Alrighty, so let's get it started, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Alright, what do we have here? Our conspiracy theory came true. That's right. So early last year, or about the time when the jab was getting rolled out, I, and not just me, but many of us, we were very concerned because we thought that unlike the proposed statement from Scott Morrison that the jab would never be mandatory, that it would indeed become mandatory and a requirement for working or accessing public and private services. Now, so many of us raised concerns at the time, and so many people in the public and in the government and in the media labeled us as conspiracy theorists and that we were making statements devoid of any type of logical reasoning. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I would just like to put on record a little protest that I participated in along with other people at Greg Hunt's office last year. Maybe you were there. If you were there, put that in the comments, where we really accurately predicted what the government was going to do. So I've got a little clip here from the news coverage just to sort of show what happened back then. So take a look at this.
Good evening. Anti-vax protesters have targeted the Mornington Peninsula office of Health Minister Greg Hunt as Australia's vaccine rollout is plagued by new problems. It's been revealed the doctor at the centre of the overdose scandal was previously sanctioned after complaints over his practice.
At a Somerville shopping centre, the Federal Health Minister's office was flanked.
And Australia is worth fighting for!
By vaccination protesters and police.
He only cares about advancing his career and advancing the corporate interests of the pharmaceutical corporations.
It's not a vaccine, it's poison.
Getting the COVID jab in Australia isn't compulsory, but the protesters believe everyone will be pressured to have the jab.
In which ways will Australian citizens be punished if they choose not to take the vaccine? What private and public services will they be restricted from accessing? Will they be able to travel? Will they be able to visit their loved ones in nursing homes? Will they be able to access educational services?
We must not allow this to happen.
Unlike the vaccination protest a week ago in South Yarra, which saw 20 arrests and police pepper spray demonstrators, today's remained calm, instead focusing on doubt and distrust.
For myself, I see there's more risk taking the vaccine than there is getting COVID.
The target of the protesters' message wasn't at his office. Greg Hunt's staff told 7 News he is in the electorate, but spending the day with his family.
I would say that Greg Hunt has breached his duty of care to the Australian people.
Absolutely, Greg Hunt violated his duty of care, and guess what? When Greg Hunt leaves office this year, he will be on a very, very nice, shall we put it, six-figure income for the rest of his life under the pension. That's something else that needs to be scrapped. And remember when Scott Morrison said the jab would be voluntary and it wouldn't be mandatory? Well, I'm going to just remind you of that.
We do not have a mandatory vaccination policy in this country. We do not have that. We are not proposing to have that. That is not changing.
So despite being labelled crazy and conspiracy theorists, a lot of us, were able to accurately predict what the government was indeed up to. And of course, ScoMo lied about it. And this is something that I think everybody should remember. What this tells me is that if the government is capable of blatantly lying about one thing, what else are they capable of lying about? Which brings us to our next topic, which is, will digital ID become mandatory? Now, the government has explicitly expressed on the digital ID website that it won't be compulsory and that your data will be protected and the government won't use it to pry into our personal lives. But my question to you at home is really, really simple, and that is, can we trust the government? Ask your friends and family around the dinner table and see what they say. So in regards to a digital identity, how would one define it? Well, for this question, I say that we look to the grand architect of the digital identity, none other than the boss, let's call him the boss, of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. So this guy right here wearing an interesting costume, he looks like a supervillain to me, maybe he is. So the World Economic Forum boss and digital ID visionary, Klaus Schwab. How does he define a digital ID? And then we'll take a bit more of a further look into it.
And now, the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of this digitalization, it's much more. It's a combination of technologies. It's not just the digital technology. Just think of genetics, think of brain research and so on. And the power of the fourth industrial revolution comes from the combination of all those technologies. Actually, I was saying it's at the end what the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Sounds very ominous and something that I certainly do not want to participate in any way, shape or form. All right, so you can go and read all you want about the digital identity as published by the government to see what they're saying, and they openly admit that this is a centralized database that will contain aspects about our personal, financial and biometric data. That's right. So biometric data, of course, referring to things such as potentially our fingerprints, facial recognition, and who knows. The government likes to use broad terms that could potentially encapsulate many, many categories. And I think it's a very underhanded approach at selling this system to the public. So I see a lot of problems with the emergence of this digital ID system, collecting all of our data, having it in one location with the government. I think the government has done more than enough to convince Australians they can't be trusted, but I'm going to run through some problems that I've documented, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Again, put your thoughts in the comments. All right, so the first issue is, of course, trust. And here's what I've got here. Despite major opposition from the public, and there has been an outpouring of opposition, the government persists in proceeding with the digital identity agenda and is allocating excessive resources in order to win over the trust of the public. Okay, so first of all, I think a great rule in life is if somebody is trying really, really hard to convince you to trust them, I would say that is always an indication that you should question very, very strongly whether or not you should trust that person. So the program has even been labeled the TGIF, the Trusted Digital Identity Framework. So the government actually putting the word trusted in the title just to let you know, hey, you can trust us. Look, it's right there in the title. So just remember ScoMo, just remember what ScoMo said about the jab. All right, point number 2 here. Stakeholder transparency, that's right. So the government makes mention of approximately 300 stakeholders who are involved in the digital ID project, yet does not name who they are. Now, I argue that it is absolutely in the best interest of the public that we know which corporations are getting on board with the digital ID agenda, this particular project, so we can hopefully better understand why they may be taking an interest in this type of mass centralization of personal, financial, and biometric data. So I'm just going to show you the website right here, and this is coming from digitalidentity.gov.au regarding the stakeholders. So here it says, throughout the consultation process, we've engaged with approximately 300 stakeholders. So a stakeholder can be defined by an individual entity, a corporation that has an interest in this particular project across Australia. Stakeholders have included Australian state and territory governments, the private sector, industry associations, individuals, and consumer groups. Okay, so extremely broad. What we want is for these individuals, industry associations, corporations, etc., to be explicitly named in the interest of public trust. I mean, hey, the government is basically demanding that we trust them, so why are they not being transparent here about the stakeholders? That's a question for you to ponder at home. All right, another point here, allegiance. World Economic Forum boss Klaus Schwab has openly boasted about his capability to hijack sovereign nations' legislative process, which of course raises the question in going ahead with this digital ID program, is the government more interested in the needs and interests of civilians or in the vision of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab? So I'm going to play you a little clip about Klaus Schwab here boasting about his capacity to infiltrate foreign governments. I mean, this is all just out in plain sight. You really just have to look at it. So check this out.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. Mm-hmm. I'm here with the president, who is a young global leader. But what is important for me?
So the terminology he uses, penetrating cabinets, what do you think? Do you think we can trust this guy? Do you think that we should leave the World Economic Forum? I certainly do. What I want to see in Australia is a country whereby our policy is guided by Australians, not by these foreign entities such as the World Economic Forum. I also think that Australian politicians who are intertwined with the World Economic Forum should rightly register as foreign agents. What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comments. All right, so allegiance. Another concern is privacy. The digital centralization of citizens' personal, financial, and biometric data will be known to the government. So personal information, who we are, what we do, our identity, financial, what we do for a living, how much we earn, debts, savings, assets, things like that. Biometric data, referring to things such as potentially our DNA, facial recognition, fingerprints, who knows? The government is very vague in their language, but does specify biometric data, leaving so much scope for what that may actually be. So the simple fact of the matter is this information should not be, in my opinion, should not be centralized and easily accessible by anybody, government or anyone in the private sector. So simply a matter of privacy, I say, is a good enough reason to reject this ridiculous proposal. Well, it's actually not a proposal. Government's going full steam ahead. All right, security. There's many factors to be concerned about. One, Australians' safety will be put at risk in the event of cyber attacks, and cyber attacks do, of course, happen. So here's a little example here from 2020. Fears private details of the Defence Force members compromised in database hack. So if the ADF can be hacked, then surely a digital identity system can be hacked as well. That's my reasoning. All right, 2, Australian safety will be put at risk in the event of a rogue public sector worker seeking to harm a private citizen. All right, so we don't know exactly which public sector workers will have access to this database. What if there does happen to be somebody in the public sector seeking to harm an individual from the public? It'd be very easy to do so. And of course, the government is proposing and putting forward legislation to, they say, protect people's privacy and to legislate against people exploiting this people exploiting this system who work in the public sector. But we all know that just because rules exist does not mean they can't be broken. So I'm not saying it would happen, but I am saying it could happen. All right, so there's huge scope for public exploitation. I consider, it's my firm view, the public has been exploited by the government for far too long, and we must absolutely shorten their leash. I think that's the only reasonable thing to do to restore dignity to we as a people. So I've got some pointers here. 1, potential for personal data to be used in police investigations. Well, no, the police would never do that, right? They would never use our data that we thought was private. Well, hold on, not so quickly. What do we have here from last year? Breach of trust. Police using QR check-in data to solve crimes, all right? So I say the greatest indication of the future is the past. If something has happened before, then I say that's proof that that same thing can happen again. All right, 2, potential for targeted advertising campaigns. All right, we're subjected to enough of that on social media. I think we don't need any more. 3, failure to comply could restrict members of the public from accessing services and or employment should digital ID become a mandatory requirement in certain areas. Now, the government says this is a voluntary program, and if you choose to participate, it great, your life will become easier, and if you don't, well, that's up to you. When did we hear this before, ladies and gentlemen? When did we hear this before? Honestly, fool me once, okay, shame on me. Fool me twice. Sorry. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I think that we really need to get back to that particular notion. All right, and 4, potential for the implementation of a social credit system. Again, not saying this would happen. I'm just saying it could happen. Now, we look at the lockdown model, of course, that was first brought to the attention of the world in communist China, exported to the world. Nobody thought it would ever happen. So I really think we need to speak in terms of what governments are capable of. If we look throughout history and we look at the greatest industrial scale injustices committed against large groups of people, they've always been carried out by governments who have exploited their positions of power. So in my very humble view, we need to restrict that power in order to mitigate our risk of industrial scale exploitation more so than what's already occurred up to this point. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? So public exploitation. Alrighty, now, where are we? Which of course leads us to the ultimate question that's on everybody's minds. Is a social credit system coming to Australia? I fear it could be. I hope that it's not. I'm running for politics because I want to fight against this type of incursion on our basic rights, on our basic dignity. Now, this is a terrible system that's in place in China right now, and lots of people in China are suffering on tremendous levels. I have a little clip here talking about the social credit system in China. I'm going to play that for you right now.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now, the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
I think being ranked is a good thing. A society has to have rules.
It forces us to be well behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
But in an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen.
By using the most data possible, the so-called big data, the system will play an important role in rebuilding a moral society.
The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb. Their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiao Wenwang is a model citizen. She lives in Nanjing, a testing ground for social ranking. Married with a child, she has a job in a retirement home, no debts, and she wouldn't dream of jaywalking.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiao Wenwang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiao Wenwang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my score.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens.
It's a matter of principle. Those people have to be condemned.
Those people aren't honest, so they have to pay the price.
It's only right to pay your debts. You have to blacklist those that don't.
The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to zero. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Liu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry, because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
After our meeting, Liu Hu learned that his name had been removed from the blacklist, but he still has a long way to go if he doesn't want to languish at the bottom of the social credit hierarchy.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I'm very concerned about this system. I don't believe we should trust the government to be in possession of such large amounts of our personal, financial and biometric data, especially in one database. Unfortunately, as it stands at the moment, the government already knows most things about us. And if we look through the context of the past couple of years, it's very safe to say the government has drastically increased their power. And as we know throughout history, once government attains certain levels of power, they are very, very reluctant to give that power away. In fact, we tend to see the opposite effect of the government wanting more and more power and more control. So I say this is a fight against centralization. So three major concerns, and concerns that I say are good enough reason for we, the public, to stand up and to completely reject this garbage. A, our safety could be compromised, okay? Our data falls into the wrong hands and it could be ending up very, very bad. B, Failure to use a digital ID system could potentially lock us out of society. What if certain businesses and certain government services make it a mandatory requirement? Okay, does that sound familiar to you? C, worst case scenario is a Chinese Communist Party style social credit system, which I think that hopefully we can all agree we do not want in Australia. Alrighty, anyway, moving along here, ladies and gentlemen, got some interesting news. Check this out. Shanghai residents fight back against government tyranny. Now, this is actually monumental. Protesting in China is something very special, and it takes a huge amount of courage, but it also indicates the absolute brutality unleashed by the CCP against their own citizens. So why is it so difficult to protest in China? Well, protesting in China is outlawed really for most topics. That's right. And when we look back to the last big protest in China, we think about, of course, the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Thousands of innocent, unarmed protesters shot and killed in the streets. So the Chinese Communist Party makes every attempt to shut down dissent, even using lethal force, as well. That's just simply in the history books. So when Chinese citizens stand up, it's really something that we should commend. We should encourage them. The Chinese people have had their rights trampled all over by the CCP, so I say good on them, and it's just really, really heartwarming to see. Now, this is in relation to the brutal lockdown in Shanghai. So you've got a city of 26 million people, brutal lockdowns. People are becoming very, very hungry. People are scared about where their next meal is going to come from. This is complete authoritarianism. I have some footage from some protests and just residents expressing their desperation. I'm going to play that for you right now.
This is footage China doesn't want circulated. Residents of a Shanghai housing compound are protesting against the city's COVID lockdown measures. They've been confined to their homes since March the 2nd and have undergone over 10 rounds of mass testing. According to a person familiar with the matter, these videos are being actively censored from Tencent's WeChat platform. The person says Tencent told staffers the videos were taken down because they violated China's laws. A third video, which doesn't contain people chanting phrases like freedom, is allowed to remain online. A Tencent representative declined to comment. The censorship reflects China's growing dilemma over its COVID-0 approach as it takes a massive economic and social toll on the country. Some 71 million people across the country are in lockdown or imminently facing one.
回去，然后啥样都不说，当时，哦呦。
这个是真的来叫啊！好了，终于2万人，所有人都在叫，要命了！就刚刚5分钟前头，叫还没几个了，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了，要死！要命了！再这样弄下去，我跟侬讲，真的要出事体了，麻烦了。根治啥么呢？因为所有的人，伊都不晓得这个状态到底维持到啥个情况。我总要拨个标准，或者是讲有一个具体的说法。没，侬讲看，闷了7天，当然屋里向啊，不能出门啊。不是说不能出小区啊，这不行的，马上弄下就要出事情。
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I just want to express my support, of course, for the residents there in Shanghai, standing up and pushing back. It looks absolutely brutal. It's just disgusting what the government is doing to their people over there. And our best wishes are, of course, with those being affected by this disgusting government authoritarianism. All right, now, moving along here. Atagi gives advice on sedated jab administration. That's right. So we're going to have a bit of a look at what's going on here. Let me just open this up. So getting the jab just got a whole lot easier, and that was published by glamadelaide.com.au, and there's a picture of a bloke there seemingly, I don't know if he's sedated or what that's all about, but let's have a look at what Atagi is saying. So Atagi advice on the use of sedation for COVID-19 vaccination. So of course, this refers to injecting people with the COVID jab whilst they are sedated. So I'm going to just read this to you and let you make of it as you will. Background, I'm going to read. The process of administering a vaccine may cause severe anxiety in some individuals with anxiety disorders or needle phobia, and may be difficult in certain individuals with behavioral disorders. A tiered approach, initially using non-pharmacological measures, may assist in facilitating vaccination. Well, maybe if some people have severe anxiety about it, that could just mean maybe they just don't want to get the jab. What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comments. Maybe they just don't want it. In patients where non-pharmacological techniques have failed, sedation may facilitate safe administration of vaccines in some special circumstances. He goes on to say, informed consent must be obtained prior to each dose from the patient themselves, or where the patient does not have capacity to give informed consent, from the parent, guardian, or substitute decision maker. So what do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? So if one is unable to give informed consent, I mean, why should the default perspective be that the person in question does in fact want the procedure to go ahead? I'm just putting the question out there. Put your thoughts in the comments. It says here, sedation should not be used as a measure to enforce compliance with vaccination requirements. Well, we agree. It definitely shouldn't be used, right? It goes on to say here, indications for sedation. In most cases, sedation should not be used as a first-line option. In most cases. But maybe there's a few exceptions for people who are particularly troublesome. I don't know. I'm just trying to read between the lines. What do you think? It says here, many individuals with anxiety, behavioral disorders, etc. can be safely vaccinated. It goes on to say, with non-pharmacological techniques such as low sensory stimulation environment, presence of comfort, person or object, distraction with music, video or toys, relaxation techniques, and cognitive behavior therapy. So why does this statement not mention this? To me, it's very obvious that if somebody has very, very severe anxiety, maybe they just don't want it. So I think this whole COVID-19 debacle has gone on for too long. It needs to end. I think what is simply needed at this stage is for all COVID policy, state of emergency to be completely overhauled. We need to get back to how we were living before. And if I had it my way, I would want to see the permanent disabling of pandemic emergency powers to ensure the government does not do this to us again. In a perfect world, that is exactly what I'd like to see. And well, that's what I'm advocating for in my campaign. Now, a devil's advocate may say, well, what would happen in that instance if in the future there was a hugely deadly virus? Shouldn't the government have some type of capability to enact emergency powers? And my answer to that question is no, they shouldn't. My reason for that is that I am far more concerned about a dangerous government than I am about a dangerous virus. What do you think? Do you echo those sentiments? Put your thoughts in the comments. Alrighty, now, Making Political History program. Put your hand up if you tuned in. An awesome program designed to educate Australians on how to vote, the ins and outs of voting, the electoral process. The group on Facebook with over 7,000 members has been taken down. Okay, this is actually astonishing. The group doesn't talk about COVID jabs or lockdowns or anything like that, or any of the touchy subjects that could get you wiped from social media. It's an education program, a program about why voting's important, the mechanics, how to vote correctly. It's been completely scrubbed off Facebook. So I can't think for the life of me how this particular group or program would have triggered the algorithms. We're only left with our speculation. So what has gone on here? Is it possible that maybe somebody in the government here in Australia has colluded with somebody inside of Facebook to take this page down? I can't answer that question because I don't know. No explanation has been given. So ladies and gentlemen, what this proves without any shadow of a doubt is to make an impact in this upcoming federal election, we need to get on the streets. We need to campaign. We need to spread the word about freedom-friendly candidates as far and wide as we possibly can. Otherwise, my concern is that the duopoly will continue and Australia will continue down this path of huge government and restricted freedoms for the individuals. So, ladies and gentlemen, get out on the street, make a difference. And of course, if you'd like to make a difference with my campaign, morgancjonas.com. No, it's not mandatory, nothing like that. But if you want to support me, that's where you go. Alrighty, so ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the show, MCJ Report number 161. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, my loyal supporters. Thank you so much. Also, people who are here for the first time. I encourage you to stay up to date with our movements. What we're doing is really exciting. Of course, an independent campaign for the Senate. We are just pushing forward every single day, working hard, and none of it would be possible without your support, ladies and gentlemen. So, of course, if you'd like to get on board, morgancjonas.com. This is a campaign unlike any campaign that has ever taken place before. And let's get in there and let's make history, folks, because the rate we're going, Australia will rapidly turn into a country that is undesirable, and we don't want that to happen. Absolutely not. We owe it to our future generations to leave Australia a better country than how we found it. And we also owe it to those who fought before us to make our country what it is. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Morgan C. Jonas signing out. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to support my independent campaign for the Senate, the best way you can do so is registering your details at morgancjonas.com and staying up to date with our movements.
Authorised by Morgan Charles Jonas, Independent for the Senate, Melbourne.